This episode of Profiles in Risk is sponsored by Zywave. Insurers, brokers, and agencies are facing escalating risk and rising complexity. Only Zywave delivers a performance multiplier, equipping you with the tools to get risk right, unlock efficiency, and scale at new speeds. Find out more at 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝘀.com.
Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas. And today I have with me Paul Vacquier. I believe that I got the pronunciation right. Founder and CEO at Beagle Services. Paul, thank you for joining me today. How's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you so much for having me. And you nailed it. Vacquier, perfect.
Perfect. 3 years of French in high school. Just enough to be able to pronounce it. I normally break the ice over the weather. And according to LinkedIn, you are in the LA area. So even though we're recording October 7th, I'm assuming it's just beautiful.
It's a nice day. We've had some clouds coming through. The latest icebreaker on my side is I am now the father of 8 baby chicks. So we're starting to get up some of our own eggs, hopefully around the holidays.
Oh, so when you say LA Metro, I'm assuming you mean like an hour and 20 minutes out from LAX, where you actually have some land.
Oh no, recently I moved my family down to San Diego pretty recently. But I still love Los Angeles. I still have a house in Los Angeles. But no chickens in Los Angeles. The chickens are down here in San Diego where we are full time.
So is this the first set of animals that you're adding other than like cats and dogs?
This is the first set of animals inclusive of cats and dogs. So this is the attempt at a baby step into pet ownership.
Chicken. Okay, well, at least they have an ROI. They have that advantage. They're not particularly fun to play with compared to a dog, but although they might be nicer than a cat. So welcome to chicken ownership. Hopefully it goes well for you. Hopefully those organic free range eggs are everything that you're dreaming that they would be.
If we can make it through the coyotes, and the next time there's a line for eggs at Trader Joe's and I don't have to wait in it, then this has been a success.
Perfect. All right. We always give the guest the chance to give the elevator pitch. What is Beagle Services?
Very, very briefly, Beagle provides the last mile deployment and expertise of leak detection technology. So we're structured in such a way to facilitate partnerships with carriers and parties, agencies that have a desire to get this type of technology installed to help prevent water damage. So Beagle is employees, not a contractor network that operates purely at the request of referrals from carriers and agencies and risk consultants and folks like that to deploy leak detection technology.
All right. So So one conversation I've had several times is that water is like the number one cause of loss for property, or definitely one of the top two.
Yes, it's the largest non-cat cause of loss.
Perfect.
So when you look outside of like wind and hail, water is the greatest. It's 5 times more likely than fire and theft.
All right. So you haven't talked about like specific device. I've had several people on the show talk about like their specific device for leak detection. You haven't mentioned a specific device.
That's correct. Yeah, okay. There's a lot of technology out in the space, different manufacturers trying to make great products that are in the market. We are the hardware agnostic provider of the service. So with all of these different solutions operating different ways, some machine learning based, some threshold based, some off of Wi-Fi, some off of cellular, commercial, residential, all of the various ways the technology works in the space. We provide the expertise across all of that so that the carrier or the agent doesn't have to become an expert in the technology. All they have to do is say, I've got a need, let me send it to Beagle, and then we help there with the advice around which system would work best for that property, but also that client, and then be able to provide also the deployment of that in the field. So the physical plumbing, if that's necessary, and also then training the homeowner or the homeowner's representative on how to live with the technology. Very few people are used to having something installed on their house that can shut their water off when they're in the shower. So making sure that they know how to live with that following the deployment of the technology is also part of the program.
All right. So a more holistic way to prevent water losses.
The goal is to be the one-stop shop for that technology demand. So whether or not you're looking for a valve, a sensor, a valve and a sensor, what the different property type is, how the property is used, who the client is or clients are, all of these various things can lead to a pretty complicated decision tree that an agent who's also worried about the collection and the car and the life and everything else doesn't need to have the expertise behind. We can provide that service for them and that expertise. So the goal is to be the one-stop shop, to then make the recommendations and then do the actual deployment and become that trusted source for the referring party, meaning the agent or the carrier.
All right. All right. And you mentioned a network of plumbers, basically.
Yes, except we're a bit crazy in that we employ them.
Yeah. So that, I mean, the labor right Bernie bro that I am loves the fact that they're actually employed, that you're going against the fabric of the Uberization of the workforce that we've seen over the last several years. Why?
Really, it's also why we named the company after a dog, right? And that is because we wanted the concept primarily to be built around trust. So when you think about an agent, particularly, or a carrier who is, at the epicenter of that client relationship, they need to make sure that when they're referring a trade out to the home, that they know who's going to be there and that they can also provide some type of follow-up around what the experience was like. And if the client needs follow-on help, that they know somebody will pick up the phone. So in that instance, and because of those reasons, we really wanted the concept of trustworthiness to stand out, and that's why we employ the team. So we're not haggling for pricing. We're not looking at, there's no commission in our structure, so that the client or the pros aren't incented financially to do anything other than the work that is requested or referred to from the partner, meaning the carrier or the agent. Now, of course, if the homeowner says, I also want the filtration system, or I also want a water heater, or that kind of thing, we can help them with that. But the incentives were kind of foundational to why we formed the business the way we did. And that is to be able to align those incentives with the referring party and the client.
Okay, so I'm assuming that the kind of the downside is you probably don't have like 48 state or 50 state coverage at this point.
The biggest criticism is we can't be everywhere yet. So as we grow, plumbing is very locally regulated. So in order to have a pro in a particular region, you're looking at licensure, affiliation of licenses, all of these various regulatory environments, not as strict, but sometimes it feels as strict as the insurance market, to make sure that that the pros can do the work. Because of that licensure requirement and our ability to employ the team, we are not in 50 states, but we now cover about 25 major metro markets, and are continuing to expand that footprint as our partners continue to have increased demand across the country.
All right. All right. I'm normally curious about the implementation. So in this case, there's no specific device. When a carrier engages you, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we have a general understanding, and we work with all of our carrier partners to understand what types of systems meet their underwriting guidelines. So in most instances, they are flow-based automatic water shutoff valves. If you're looking at like a standalone single-family property. Now, in those instances, there's about 6 or 7 major manufacturers that make a compliant product. And with that, we understand, kind of which ones sometimes carriers have particular preferred relationships with. We also understand, uh, what would meet the client's needs from their perspective while also meeting the underwriting guidelines. And that's where you kind of get into that expertise around how the property's used. Well, first of all, how big the pipe is, because not every manufacturer makes a product of all sizes. So as you start thinking about like the larger homes, that can be an immediate kind of filter around which systems are even available for the client. And then does it have to be tied into a central station alarm system? Do you have to have account for like an automatic pool filler, irrigation? Is it a secondary property? Is there Wi-Fi? All of these does the homeowner have a smartphone? All of these various things kind of filter down as the products become more ubiquitously required or recommended. You start encountering more scenarios where somebody maybe doesn't have a smartphone or the home doesn't have Wi-Fi. Um, and there's unique plumbing circumstances that the team sees all the time across the country now.
All right. Um, for now, entirely focused on homes, not doing commercial properties yet.
We do a little bit of commercial work with some of our partners. That has not been a core focus of the work yet. I think the deployment of commercial systems is still in its very, very early stages. I want to say almost dramatic infancy. From a capability standpoint, it's much more challenging to understand when and how to shut the water off on, a pipe feeding an entire building than it is just to feed, a standalone single family home. Particularly if there's mixed use, if you've got a medical facility and a hotel and an apartment building, making sure that the building is secure, but also making sure that it's, not providing challenges to the occupants is a big issue.
All right. What's the revenue model? Who's paying for it?
Yeah, that really depends upon the partnership. So, in the majority of instances, the carriers are either making a recommendation or a requirement to the client that they should have this technology, and the client bears that expense. There are other circumstances where the carriers help, or the agents will help offset some of that expense. They have their own various state by state rebating laws and stuff like that they have to make sure they're working within. And then there are some programs where they're fully borne by the carrier. Sometimes that's usually around like piloting and understanding, kind of getting their data sets in order to understand like the efficacy of the product across their insured book. But it really runs the gamut on the revenue model around who's paying in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah, so you got lots of flexibility on, we'll design it for what makes sense for how you guys want to do it and what your book is.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason why we started the business was because we're believers that this technology will ultimately be everywhere. And because of that, there are going to be multiple winners from a hardware standpoint in the space. But where you really where the demand is growing is where you have a shrinking trade labor supply in the market of, skilled tradesmen and men and women in the plumber category. And so making sure that you have a plumber workforce that can work with the Wi-Fi at the property and will, be able to help, plug something into a power by Ethernet cable. All of these various circumstances, could connect a control panel to the system. So being able to understand that there will be increased demand of that specific niche in the trade because the whole category continues to grow. I think I saw recently somewhere that it's expected to be over a $3 billion annual category in the next few years. So, this is an area where there's growing demand. It solves a problem for everybody. And you also then have a shrinking trade. So being able to build a trade services company specifically around filling that niche is where we've focused.
What kind of results are the carriers seeing?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great question. I think one of the most interesting things that we're seeing around the carrier data uh, is how bad their data actually is. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of the cat products category has been around for 20 years. Now, somebody who got credit for having a shutoff valve installed on their house 15 years ago might still have that credit. I might just be riding on the renewals of the policy, but there's no proof or data point back to the carrier that it actually is still there and functional. So I liken this before you had auto telematics and everybody was able to just to see what your mileage is. You would get the form in the mail that would say, "What's your mileage?" And you'd write, "Oh, well, I'm saying it's 12,000 or less, so let me write 11,500 on it," and then you sign that back and send it to the carrier. I mean, like, there's no proof point beyond just like, "Hey, I've got it." So because they're connected products, you can start actually helping solve that data feedback loop to make sure that the actual efficacy of the technology uh, is truly understood. But at this point, the IoT manufacturers will all have their varying studies that they've done that say, a lot and a lot of great data around the efficacy of the products. And then you look at the insurer book and them fact checking that. Usually they say it's nowhere near as good as the manufacturer data is. Well, that's because they're looking at loss ratios across people who have the product credit and don't have the product credit. And then they dissect who has the product credit and still had a claim. The proof of having the product is not present. So you really get into an understanding of the systems must be working well enough where the good data is offsetting more than the bad data. And it's still providing that continued incentive.
Okay. For for carriers, I think every carrier that does property understand that water is a huge issue. But so those that don't yet have a solid program when it comes to leak detection, what what they need to know? What are the main things that you want to do you think they need to know before they embark in this?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that's maybe a counterintuitive is when you're thinking less about what type of product you're selecting and you're just going to do something in the space. I always recommend that they don't fully bear the price of it, that they let the homeowner have some skin in the game.
Interesting. Uh-huh.
And the reason is because if they're just getting a free product and you're having to follow up with them multiple times to actually have them deployed, if it's a DIY service or if it's a professionally installed or set up service, like we run programs with carriers where the products are do-it-yourself installs, but they're not doing it. So you have to actually have somebody come out to do the install and the deployment. In those instances, even if the client's coming out of pocket for something nominal, call it even $100, they're much more likely to then actually follow through and put the thing on the pipe or, open the door when when a pro shows up to be able to install it or tell their spouse that, somebody's coming by the property at 3 o'clock on Thursday to help with something. So I think some skin in the game from the client perspective provides much greater data and feedback down the value chain when you start evaluating what's happening. Because you'll see programs where, okay, great, we're going to do 10,000 deployments, and then it's fully paid by the carrier. Now all of a sudden their take rate is way below what they were expecting, and you're not going to hit the threshold that they were hoping to hit, and it's viewed as a failure. But that's because of kind of the false start from a marketing standpoint and not having the clients buy in.
All right. Um, I'm always curious on the origin story, how you realized this was a need and that you were the right people to do it. And I've always got the guest LinkedIn pulled up. So in your case, I'm particularly curious because you're not a former plumber or former carrier guy or right, like property repair guy. You're an attorney. So how did you realize that this was a need?
Yeah, look, I mean, the path from attorney to here has been a long but fun one. And I had an employee once look at me and say, "Well, if it was easy, it wouldn't be as fun." And so we find pleasure in the challenge that's presented. The short version is that in 2018, I was looking more for a group of people that I wanted to work with, less focused on what problem I was solving. And I knew the founders of Flow Technologies, which we then ultimately sold to Moen. It's now the Moen system and the Flow by Moen valves. And while there, I helped oversee and run the insurance carrier path to market for Flow, now Moen. That was really what the eye-opening piece was for my business partner at Beagle and I to say, well, there's a real problem in this deployment. We can go out and have great relationships with these carrier partners, but when it comes to actually getting the work done in the last mile, there's a massive gap in being able to fill that need. So you could have instances where the carrier feels a program is not a success because every time they call somebody to go do an installation of a system, they don't show up, or there's, some type of negative client feedback. So making sure that we controlled for that, we felt that there was a need for scaled employed labor to be able to help with this particular niche of a growing category. And that's how we got to where we are today.
So a problem you could have only realized by
Absolutely.
working right there.
Exactly, exactly. We're dealing with various, large insurers and trying to get programs rolled out, and then the question comes up, well, who's going to actually do it? Well, we figured somebody was going to do this, so why don't we actually try to help? We figured we could help the whole category of products, because everybody's, like I said, going to be growing and there's just continued demand. So what puts us in the best position to help the whole category? And that would be through this kind of agnostic expertise and deployment.
All right. All right. I know basically nothing about the way that plumbers work. So I am a little curious on that side, on the service provider side. Uh, did you find the plumbers happy to join as employees?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very unique kind of value proposition. So if a plumber is an excellent salesperson, and many are, out there doing great work and able to then explain to the clients all of the various things that they might need on that property, and they're making commission for that, we're not the place for that pro to work. Not because they wouldn't be excellent as an employee here, but because they're going to make a lot less money, not just hustling commission. So with the way that we're structured in that regard is to really try to just incent the partnership, and versus thinking about incenting just that one roll of the truck. So we find it's scheduled, it's non-emergency services. Most times after we get our first national holiday and we've got some new staff on the team, we'll get emails and messages that say, "Hey, this was the first 4th of July that I haven't had to like leave the barbecue to go deal with something," or like, "Hey, I've got my kid's baseball game on Tuesday afternoon. Like I can take the time off without having to worry about that impacting my paycheck." So you really find a great fit with the right pro, and particularly those that want to have that consistency, want to continue to do great work, but also want to have kind of some of that more, I don't want to say lifestyle flexibility, but that they're able to provide kind of a more scheduled and more consistent understanding of their time.
All right. So a work-life balance friendly, stable environment for plumbers, most of whom I'm guessing historically are business owners, basically self-employed.
Yeah, a lot of them are. I mean, we have an interesting, now that we've been around for about 4.5 years, we've got an interesting group that kind of spanning age ranges and levels of experience on the team. We find an interesting resonance with the younger generation of gamers that are also plumbers because they like the technology and they
Love
understand
it.
it and they're not afraid of it and they want to be able to provide that good work all day long and then be able to, do their gaming and their technology stuff. So you have a really interesting, we're starting to find some interesting kind of overlapping diagrams and circles on kind of the team and that kind of thing. Actually, ask that now in interview questions. Are you a gamer? So
I am. So I love it whenever it comes up on the podcast. Fantastic. Yes, I never thought of the plumber making sure the plumber can deal with the Wi-Fi and the Ethernet and all that. But it made me laugh when you first mentioned that. All right. Other than property, is there any particular type of carrier that is a really good fit for you guys, or any particular type of carrier that's just not a good fit, or basically any carrier that does a lot of homeowners is a good fit?
yeah, any carrier that does a lot of homeowners is a very good fit. I mean, you have various, like big picture math dynamics that get into an economic impacts around like which carriers are more incented to act. And, folks that are generally more exposed to cat prone states, they have their reinsurance, but they also want to make sure they're cutting back on everything they can control. Like you said at the beginning of the cast, this is the kind of thing that is the number one thing they can control. So if there's a certain bucket that you can't control, let's get a handle on everything we can. This is one of the tops in that piece. You just get into an understanding then around like what the economics look like. It's really in the last 7 years, what we've started really seeing is this shift from, I think, really the concept of risk mitigation as like a nice to have to being a need to have, and now shifting to actually a profit source for the carriers, meaning they're able to capture premium they wouldn't otherwise be able to capture if they didn't do this kind of work. So you would have dropped that policyholder. Now you can keep them. You would have pulled out of a state. Now you don't have to. You can write new loss that you otherwise wouldn't have written if you can control for some of the risk mitigation pieces. And so in that instance, I think it's starting to shift from a general market perspective around just loss mitigation or risk mitigation as like a kind of a nice to have to help your ratios to actually driving top line.
Fantastic. That's a radical change that has to be very welcome. Um,
Yeah, if you're looking at ch rising rates and more challenging market environments, if you're able to retain premium and you're able to keep clients happier longer with lower losses, then you'll be a very strong financial carrier.
awesome, awesome. Paul, thank you very much. When this goes live, I'll tag you on LinkedIn. I'll tag the company on LinkedIn. Uh, thank you for painting the picture of how it's flowed uh, to a more holistic way to prevent water losses.
Yeah, look, if there's anything that you want to, when you hear it back, and if there's anything that you want to touch up on, I'm more than happy to do it. So, yeah, no, thank you. Or we can do a cut and then just say like, thank you. It was great to be here, and look forward to hearing any questions anybody has.
Thank you.